Here's the second of our essay tutorials. So in the first one, we found a paper, or at least you watched me do it, and I'm assuming now that many of you have been exploring that. The next step, once you have your PDF of the paper, is to read it. And this is going to be a difficult task. I likened it in class, in our first lecture, to taking a German literature course and not speaking German. So for a professional biologist, this would be a joy. For a beginning biologist, it's a bit of a struggle. And so you shouldn't expect to be able to fully understand the paper in a single read or in a single easy read. And you should be seeking out other resources as you go along. So I thought I'd just illustrate what you could do if you had chosen this paper. You'd read the title, A New Cryptic Species, and perhaps right there, cryptic species. What does that mean to a biologist? And so you can go to Google and just put in cryptic species and see what you get. And so I've done that already. We click over to here, we get cryptic species, definition of cryptic species by Merriam-Webster is one of two or more morphologically indistinguishable biological groups that are incapable of interbreeding. And so here, this gives us a clue to something I'll talk about in a later video, which is when you're reading the paper, one of the questions you should be asking yourself that you will incorporate into your essay is why now? Why did these researchers only determine or discover a new species at this particular time? And so this in the title here, it gives us a clue to that. It's cryptic. And in that definition, it means that individuals who are not carefully observing these populations of lizards were unaware, because they're very similar in size and in color, that they were actually dealing with two separate species as opposed to what they thought was one. And so here that gives us a clue to answering part of the assignment here. So you can see how when you see something that you find difficult to interpret, you quickly can go to Google. Well, I did want to also point out when you have your paper, you've got the name of the journal, you have the volume, in this case it's 794, and then you have the page range, which is 135 to 163, and this is the year in which it was published. And so this is important later when we're talking about referencing your paper. Underneath that is a DOI, and this is a digital identification number that a lot of resources online have, and this is assigned to a paper by a journal when it's accepted for publication. And so you can look that up as well. What does DOI mean? What is a digital object identifier? And so that is a unique alphanumeric string assigned by a registration agency, the International DOI Foundation. This will only be important in citations where the paper has been published online, so it'll have a DOI number, but it doesn't yet have a volume and page number. And the way that happens is that journals will will make available to their readers the papers as they've gone through the peer review process and are accepted for publication. Will then appear online with a DOI number, but they have not been included into a volume and therefore don't have page numbers. Okay, so that's only important to some of the papers that you may have found or are citing, but not important to the one I picked because it has both a volume and a page number already. So if we go to back to my paper, so there's that. We went through cryptic species. One of the things that you'll struggle with is that this introduction is an introduction to professional biologists. So it's filled with jargon, and it assumes that you already have some expertise in lizard biology and taxonomy, which I actually don't. So if I want to know more about what an anole is, I'm going to have to reach out to other resources to find out what defines that species, or that species group. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that when you were asked, how did they determine that this is a new species, we'll see that there are some complicated methodologies that they've used. In this case, they've used DNA sequence data. They've analyzed that in a complicated way, phylogenetic analyses. And in a 500-word essay, you're not going to have to duplicate all of that detail. You're going to be reading enough about the methodologies that they have used by reaching out to other resources to be able to summarize it quite plainly. So in this case, they used DNA sequence data, analyzed it in a phylogenetic way. They've also measured morphological features of this lizard, and they did that by capturing specimens, killing them and preserving them, and then they took precise measurements of various morphological features that are typically done for lizards. And they've also removed flesh and are using some skull measurements as well. And then this analysis, the Shapiro-Wilk normality test for measurements and lepidodic characters of Anoli's Dracula, is not something that you need to demonstrate an understanding of, but you might want to name it in the paper if you were doing this, that they used this approach, and they did this in order to identify the important set of features that distinguish this species from closely related species. And so in this table here, we've got our Anoli Dracula SPN, which means new species. It's usually in Latin, though. And this Aquatorialis is the one that is, at least cryptically, looked identical to this group of lizards as well. And these asterisks here are showing significance. So it's this set of features that are distinguishing between these two otherwise cryptic species. All right, so here's another word here, holotype. I looked that one up earlier. I can show you that I just asked for a definition from Google. It's a single type specimen upon which the description and name of a new species is based, and that is common. That if you're going to be identifying a new species, you're going to have a specimen that has been well preserved and that other researchers can ask to see and to follow up on your initial work. There's also some terminology or some morphological features that I didn't know anything about. One is what is a hemipene. So I looked that up, and I'm just showing this definition here is a paired male reproductive organ. It's distinct to snakes and lizards. So if you wanted to actually see what that looks like, you can take a look at images. Here's probably a monitor lizard here, and you can see the paired hemipenes that make up part of the reproductive organ for male lizards. There's also here are snakes and some other lizard species where we see what a hemipene is. So you want to flesh out your understanding of this paper. Okay, so I'll leave that for a moment, and what I'd like to do next is just give you a brief aside on our Brightspace page, and then talk a little bit about plagiarism. So if we go to our home page, and I hope everyone has done this already, likely you've linked to this tutorial from this page anyway. But perhaps you've noticed this lizard right over here. This is Smog. She's on my lap right now. It's my 8-year-old bearded dragon. It was a pet of a graduate student of mine, but he moved away and left her with me, and I frequently bring her to class, one time per term. And I intend to do that this year, although she is getting a little old, and we'll see how she's doing. She seems to be losing a little fat, and but anyway, otherwise she seems quite happy at the moment. Below that, here is an image thrown in just to balance the animal with the plants, like the course. This was a trip I took to Madagascar in 2002 to collect species of bees within the tribe Alidapine. And this is a very famous road. It's called Avenue du Baobab. and called that because of these fantastically odd-looking baobab trees that line the road that runs from the village into a forested area where we were doing some of our research. Over here we have announcements. You see that the Biology Society has a welcoming event. You have to be 19, so that's not everyone in class, but there are many of you, and it's coming up this Friday. But you can see there's also other announcements that are related to the course. So the EssayTutorial2 was put here with a link. This is an anole, a picture of an anole I took when I was also on that trip in Madagascar. Tegan is our TA for the lecture, and when she first introduced herself to me, she said, it's Megan with the T. So it's not Tegan, it's Tegan, just so you know. Also this week I'll be giving the big question, in fact tomorrow, and so here's an advertisement, and each time we have a big question speaker we'll see a new advertisement. So if you want to keep up with what's happening in the class, anticipate things that are happening, maybe there's some interesting details about what's going on campus, we'll make those available to you here under announcements. Now over here, this is also just, this is for interest's sake. The biology department has a Twitter account called Humans Among Biology. And what we've been doing since September is each week someone or a group of someone's within the department becomes the curator for the account. They tell us a bit about themselves, whether that's a little bit of personal detail, but often it's mostly just professional detail. And so by watching this space, you can become a bit more familiar with our department. And this week it is Dr. Andrew Lang's lab, and one of his soon-to-be PhD students is now the curator, and he has been highlighting some of his lab mates and giving us pictures. We'll see that there's a picture of the group of them down here. And clearly that was taken last summer and not currently. All right, so that is, you can follow the account if you want, but it's not necessary for the course. Now, if we move now into the resources that are available to help you with the essay assignment, we have an essay assignment here under Contents. If you click on that, you'll see a series of documents. These two here are example essays that were written by students maybe 2 years ago. Both of these were considered excellent, and so you can use those to see what the expectations are or the standard is for this particular assignment. There's some library resource information which overlaps with the last tutorial that I posted here. And then there's some detail about referencing papers, which will be the subject of a future video tutorial. And here is the description of the essay assignment itself. And so we can click on that to view it. And so it's worth 10% of your total grade, 3 for draft, 7 for the final essay. And for the draft, it begins with a half-page assignment called plagiarism. And it's fairly straightforward. So there's no marks available for this, but without it, as the first page on your essay draft file, we won't mark it. We won't mark your assignment. So you need to locate and quote Munn's calendar definition of plagiarism. So you place that definition in quotes, and then following that, you'll put in brackets the location on the web that you identified. That's the URL where you found the definition. Then you're going to, by reading it a few times, you're going to internalize your understanding of this plagiarism definition, and now you're going to paraphrase it. That means you're going to put it or state it on this front page in your own words. Right? That means that you will demonstrate your understanding by paraphrasing that understanding here in this document. And so it must be unique from all your classmates as well. So there's no one answer to this, but you need to demonstrate you understand paraphrasing. Lastly, up to 4 sentences, but you can probably do it in 1 or 2, is to state why it's important to avoid plagiarism. And so that's not because there is punishment associated with being caught. I want you to think about what is the impact on person who plagiarizes their essay on their university education if they're not caught. So why would a university care about that practice? And so I'm not going to go on about the essay assignment details that we see here. I'll do that in a later video. But it is linked to what we started talking about, which is when we're confronted with large tables, technical language, and methodologies that perhaps you're unfamiliar with, the temptation now is to cut and paste. Many of you are more sophisticated in that. You'll cut and paste, and then you'll attempt to disguise it by altering some of the language. And the problem is, for those who don't understand what it is that they've pasted into their own document, is that the changes that they make are nonsensical because they didn't fully understand what was going on. And I think, though, that what we just, at the beginning of this discussion, we talked about, or I was talking about, seeking out other sources, whether it's online using Google or reading within your textbook, things that where you can take the technical language and start to break it up into things that help you with your understanding. Then paraphrasing becomes a much easier task for you. And so that's what I'd recommend. And I'll stop there, and in the next video, in a couple of days, I'll go through the goal and some of the technical details about uploading your video, or uploading your paper. And so I'll talk to you later. See you tomorrow, by the way.